just researching on a great little site about any studies that have happened around podcasts. Apparently it was none.
So this is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
That's how you're right.
All from the brain, my dude.
So no research, all creative brain, fueled by coffee.
Fueled by coffee and experience.
Experience, yeah. Of which I've got 0. And you've got an abundance.
It turns out that you just grab someone off the street, actually. And I was like, shit, what's a podcast?
So basically, we were talking about how DA could effectively use this system. We've got a podcast studio, got a couple of GoPros set up, and we've got a nice big camera, and we're recording straight onto a computer. We've got a really nice podcast studio. So I basically now want to do some research and spend some time with this format. I think, how can we effectively use this for marketing?
Yeah.
So you've done quite a few podcasts for the different people that you've worked with in the past, right?
Yeah, so I have been in a great little company, agency, who were very passionate about podcasting. And it was at the time, it was like a few years back before podcasts were like, every man and their dog had a podcast.
Yeah.
But it was cool, and like there were a lot of very successful podcast companies, podcast studios, suppliers, producers, people making them, mainly in America. And there were a couple of very successful business podcasts. But my boss was sort of passionate about getting people's stories out there based on the stories we wanted to tell, which are very much sort of like in the marketing world, like public sector, like life-changing stories.
What, like get creatives in and you say like, I don't know, it doesn't matter what person they got in?
It was sort of relevant to marketing on a level of using marketing for good. Okay. So it was sort of, what can we talk about that was about public sector, health, anything sort of thing. It wasn't like, how do we get someone in to talk about like marketing, business, like getting a CEO in to talk about their business kind of thing. Yeah. It was more about, if you got a CEO in to get them to think a little bit further, there was lots of different things we did. But so we actually built a podcast studio in our offices, and we tried lots of different things. And my favourite was around, so where we live in Hull, there is a lot of young people who get very frustrated at not having access to services that other bigger cities have, not having as many opportunities that other bigger cities have. Yeah, especially in like the creative sector. Yeah, definitely. And we wanted also, based off the back of another successful youth campaign that we had ran, we wanted to actually use all the stuff we've learned about youth engagement and being able to engage young people using marketing, social media, and apply it not just to that one specific campaign, but just ask young people, like, what matters to you? What do we care about?
Do you think that benefited in terms of
young people? Yeah. Like, it was young people.
No, I mean, surely, talking to them and hearing their stories, positively affect that person. But in terms of audience, do you think it was a young person's audience?
Yes, but the reason why it was brilliant was because we got young people in, and essentially, young people, and you could tell the people that were on the podcast knew that adults were listening, and they kind of had a go at certain points. So if we were talking about we talked about sexual health and the provision of that in schools, and the way they went off was amazing. And they talked about how, like, all of them were sort of past the age of where you get your first kind of sexual health lesson. And they went off on it, and there were so many professionals who found it so interesting, useful to listen, to actually listen to young people's voices, because bearing in mind that their audience is young people too. So that was really useful, and we actually had a really good following of younger people. When I say young people, it's like 13 to 18, maybe a bit older, although it's 21.
But anyone whose business has a certain demographic, which would be that age range, they would find it useful and kind of informative for how they would then change their marketing or change their campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that whole campaign kind of, just using a podcast on its own, kind of revolutionised a little bit in the small kind of like area it's in how you communicate with young people. And like from my own personal observation, the local health sort of body started, instead of, do you know when you make, like, do you know when there's like a youth campaign and it's like they get spray paint on a brick wall and that's the logo, like that kind of stuff. They kind of stopped doing that, and they actually, I'm pretty sure they employed someone, like they actually appointed somebody to be like the engagement person in-house, and they started a campaign where it was essentially, we want to hear from you, which was very different.
So that's like a community engagement officer, right?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know her official title, but yeah.
Yeah, that's maybe what we would call a community engagement officer now. Because as a year, I know for a fact that we want more of that. I think the idea of being able, when we've got certain clients that want to kind of create a discussion, you know, where their product is, like Shoreline's one of our clients, and they create murals based on climate change, and the point of them is to try to get communities involved to design it and create the mural and, you know, talk about the mural. So we really need community engagement officers to help us go into communities and say, like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, we want someone to be able to do that for us. That's like a really valuable role for us.
Well, that's what I do kind of now, although I specialise in events and the creative industries, and I am a freelancer. I very much look at how to engage audience on a level further than just throwing some posters or like throwing some advertisements out and spending as much money on ads as possible.
Yeah.
It's more about how do we make fans and how do we get bums in seats, where we actually, the fun thing about events is the audience is literally an audience.
Yeah.
So it literally translates from how many people are going to buy the tickets to your event and actually watch what you want them to.
That's so useful.
Yeah.
Like based on the kind of clients that I have right now, where it's not events, so monitoring what an audience actually really is, and then like lead generation, that's really new to me. Whereas when we was working on like festivals and events in the past, it was really easy to see. It was just like, oh, on the day, thousands of people.
It literally translates.
Everyone was just like, they're here because we engaged them. Because if we didn't tell them to come here, they wouldn't have come.
Exactly. And you can kind of translate that into leads. So you can say, like, bums on seats is how many people can we get into our theatre, is how many people can we get putting something into a basket on a website kind of thing. And I think one thing that I've learned, and sort of bringing it back around to engaging content like podcasts, is that people don't just like being sold to anymore. They want to be entertained, they want something, they want equal value back for their engagement essentially. So quite a lot of the time businesses that run podcasts, they probably want to be thinking about how do they bring value to their audience or their prospective audience's newsfeed. And that can be literally providing information, education, entertainment, whatever it is. And what better way to do that than sitting and giving out information?
Because I think podcasts specifically, like you said, people don't just want to be sold to anymore. And that's where podcasts can really help and go into it. Entertainment value, yeah, sure, if something's entertaining to watch, it's always going to be fun.
Absolutely.
I think personally, I don't know if this might just be me, but I would only really watch a podcast that says somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes long, which is produced by somewhere like a marketing agency. If I felt like I was being informed, I think the informational aspect is kind of the big point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, I guess a lot of people would look to them for research.
Yeah.
So I imagine if people are listening to this, they're probably like, oh, how do I use podcasts to market?
Yeah.
And I think that that's one use, and it's the most obvious one. But I think that the people undervalue building a fan base around something, and people need to think outside the box of just literally, we're a marketing company, therefore we're going to make a podcast about marketing.
Yeah.
They need to think, what value are we actually bringing people? By what are we creating a fan base? Are we providing something other than the opportunity to sell to people?
Yeah, because essentially this podcast that we're recording right now is a podcast about podcasting. And it's
super meta.
Super meta. And it's coming from a marketing agency. And really the benefit for me is that I want to try and, in this one episode, I want us to kind of work out how I can use this beautiful format going forward that will actually generate fans, audience, people actually being interested in listening, and it might be every single episode get a completely different audience depending on the topic. But I want to avoid certain pitfalls. I want to avoid being boring. I want to avoid just being like every other business podcast.
Yeah.
So you said that when you were working at your previous agency that you quite liked the setup that they had, or you believed in the mantra of it? Like, do you think that was a successful way to run a podcast?
Yeah, because I ran. I do think what we had was a lot of hurdles. Now, you like trying to organise a group of 18-year-olds to do something that is for business, like on a regular basis for a long period of time, is like difficult to do, because they change passions, they change their minds, they often have other commitments. They'd rather extracurricular activities aren't always their priority. So one thing that we learned about format was to try and keep it as interesting as possible, not just for the audience but for the presenters too. So there was a lot of format changing and development, but what I learned was that that's okay. And actually the difference between me and an 18-year-old is just age, in terms of like how my brain thinks. I get bored of things really easily, and I think that longevity, you can jump over the hurdle of sort of staying power and like being able to carry on producing a podcast and presenting it by trying to switch things up and develop and listen to what your audience wants, what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. So that format, I actually couldn't comment on what the format was, apart from it was 3 to 4 young people sat in a room. We gave them a topic that we knew they could rant about. They did no prior research, and they just sat and ranted for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then what we went away was, then I went away and edited the best parts of that. And that was the way it worked. It was very chill.
I think the way that I'm going to run this podcast, and again, this is just such a meta episode because it's just full transparency of just like, what the hell are we going to do going forward? I think, and this is going to be cut out if I'm wrong, but we're just going to do it really, really like raw, zero to minimal editing, just kind of like get a small title card at the beginning, title card at the end, our conversation throughout, and then use this as content, taking snippets from the video. So release it as a full episode, which will be, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes. And then for content for DA, we can take off snippets of what you're saying or what I'm saying, take off 30 seconds here or there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one thing that people make a mistake of in corporate marketing and agencies, and what I took away then becoming a freelancer, is that you can apply what people like in the general world to business. So, like, to explain, podcasts, what do we like? What are our favourite podcasts? Mine are very conversational, very casual, like no like format necessarily, other than the fact that I know what I'm going into. Like, I might be listening to a true crime podcast, I might be listening to a storytelling podcast, and it isn't necessarily like it's structured and very like someone's presenting it. It's very much like a couple of people going into a room and having a conversation, and they're very charismatic.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of favourites, and one of the favourites is that, essentially. It's like 3 dudes, really unstructured, just like you jump in, they're already in the middle of the conversation, and then you're just listening. And then you've got others like It's American Life, which is very formatted, it's very structured. You've got the main journalist who introduces the episode, and then you've got maybe 4 like collaborative journalists who go away and each have a story related to the topic. I think that's quite a successful podcast.
It is, and do you know what I think the difference is if we super analyse Serial or This American Life, but I think mine is like This American Life produced Serial, and that's my favourite thing that they've done.
I love Serial.
And if we think about Serial, it's like not episodic. It's one long story being told over different podcasts, which is journalism, and it's very interesting. I've never seen a business podcast do that.
How could we?
Well, you find something to explore, and you explore it over a number of episodes.
Okay.
There's a really good podcast, and I'll have to find out the name of it. But there's one that they Scene on Radio. That's what it's called. Scene on Radio, as in a film scene on radio. And it was a friend of mine who introduced me to it, and they explore, there's not a business podcast, but they explore themes in a series, and I think there's like 8 episodes, and they've explored race, but from a white person's lens.
You told me about that,
And also they discuss womanhood, women, and gender from a male perspective, and they have conversations that you would have normally, so like a feminist podcast, that kind of thing, but you're hearing it from the oppressed side of the conversation. But this podcast is an exploration of a white guy actually exploring race and gender through interviews and topics, but each episode is the same. It's all the same, but you just explore a different topic within it every month. Every week. So he explores the history of gender, for example, in the first episode. The second episode might be the science, you know, and he goes through it and he learns and he concludes at the end with another presenter about what he's learned.
That's quite interesting. So from a business, to make it very grounded in marketing, for example, if I wanted to do a podcast series on, let's say, disruptive branding, then I could do an episode on the history of disruptive branding, like who we kind of really give the innovative status for kind of disruptive branding, and how it kind of like then week by week or episode by episode do like 3 or 4 part series on it. But there's a true deep dive into each of the different categories.
Yes.
So that could work.
That could work. Do you know what you've already started potentially with this entirely massively meta episode that we're having is you sat with me and asked me my opinion about how you should do this podcast. And you know what would be even more meta? You do a series asking different people how you should do this podcast.
That's a good idea, yeah. So tell me a little bit about your history and why the hell I've got you here to ask you then.
So I am, I don't really have a title. My history is like doing a lot of everything and trying to explore what the hell I am. Oh my god, my job role is meta inside of this podcast. What the hell?
Every single person that I know like half introduced you to before you arrived was like, oh, what does she do? And I was just, I've changed the title every single time.
Everything.
Yeah, everything.
No, I do specialise, like I'm not completely 100% sort of like doing everything. But I am, I think I call myself like a creative director, creative developer, but my specialisms is events and marketing, or marketing and media. So I started working in the events industry, doing stage management, event production roles, that kind of thing. I did a bit of wardrobe and tech, but generally I worked in festival and theatre doing all of the backstage stuff, and I loved that. And then I moved back to my hometown and jumped into marketing because I've always been interested in it, but also because there wasn't a lot of event work. Like we said, Hull lacks an element of creative jobs.
Was it Birmingham that he was working there before?
No, Bradford. I was working
big.
before. Yeah, well, West Yorkshire, I worked in like many different cities, and I've also like worked in like Ireland and Bristol and been to London and that kind of thing as well. So it was like very much. But I moved back to Hull for various reasons, but one of them was because Hull had won the City of Culture, and I thought there would be lots of events work, but I was quite late to coming home, and most of the jobs had been taken. So I was like, well, what the hell do I do now? And there was a job going at an agency for social media marketing, and I was like, I could do that. Like I studied film. I'm interested in media, you know, and I also feel like I'm quite good at communicating. So then I jumped into an agency and like fell in love with it. Ended up becoming the head of the media department, where I was making and directing and writing film. I was writing social media content, and the lovely thing about that place was I was nurtured into exploring new skills, trying to be innovative, because they truly were an innovative company who specialised specifically in public sector health and campaigns to change the world. And it was more about actually doing good with the tools that marketing had. So that was developed there.
So to bring that background, that personal experience of yours, background to podcasting, it is a beautiful series of events of why you being in charge of a podcast would make a lot of sense, because you've worked with people in terms of the theatre industry, you got to know how to target audiences. And then when you moved into this media agency or marketing agency position, because their focus was on kind of improving people's lives and providing information for people to better, like, have their health, etc. And podcasting, the informative kind of format of a podcast would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. I always enjoyed teaching as well, and enjoyed that element of it. And I enjoyed speaking to people. I thrive from talking. Like, ideas generation in a room full of people is like my warm, happy place. I think that naturally, like, doing YouTube and like presenting and doing talks and doing podcasts was like where I thrived and started to think very much that this was a really positive way that we could move into innovation. And it was at a time where on social media, like video was becoming a very big thing.
Yeah.
So it was a natural transition from doing social media into media creation.
Do you think that like video content is still necessary or as innovative? Like, is it just as important?
No, it is important. The annoying thing is it's no longer innovative, it is default. Like if people aren't doing it. I did a talk like 5 years ago at a business event that I was like, I didn't know what to talk about, but then I can't remember, someone had mentioned like, well, what do you do to be like so successful? Like what's that? And I'm like, well, I try and innovate my content. And they're like, well, what do you do? And it was like video, podcast, whatever. And I was like, oh God, yeah. Like, so I did this entire presentation on how the video was the future of social media. And my call to action was basically like really mean. And I was like, if you're not doing video already, then you're behind. And like, you're shit, basically. And and then like 5 years later, like the main platforms video is algorithms are like video is king.
Yeah.
There are entire platforms, obviously YouTube, but TikTok has been more visited than Google, I think it was, or more visited than Facebook, like last month or something. And that is only video. And there are brands who literally still haven't tried Instagram stories. And that is the most basic and simple way to capture and engage an audience. I mean, I'm saying this obviously out of point of privilege of knowing about it, but if you're not trying to work out these platforms and stuff and you're expecting people to care about your product while you're basically going, this mug is really good, you should buy it, in like a text post on Instagram, like how are you expected to like succeed? So you need to think about how you can, but this is the funny thing is you have that one person that's like, buy this mug, and it's like, what, I could make an entire month's worth of content around this mug in theory, and it's video, it's photography, it's like memes, jokes, and it's also, let's sit and talk about this mug a bit, like let's have a conversation with people about, let's ask our audience, would they prefer to put coffee or tea in this mug? It's thinking beyond the selling point of what you're trying to sell. It's what are our audience interested in? How can we bring them value so that we look like the authority voice and the place to get whatever we're trying to sell once they come around to getting it? And I think it's the long game that people need to start to play.
Yeah.
I follow so many products on Instagram that I can't afford yet, but when I can, I'm buying them. And I enjoy being a fan of certain things. There's like companies that I won't mention because it's probably like embarrassing because I'm a massive nerd, but like there's companies that literally like I message about like their Instagram stories. Like I'm a proactive geek of brand, like a brand fan. But it's not because I'm a marketer, it's because they're really good at content.
So
like,
you literally like message them and just like compliment them?
Yeah,
just say this is really good.
Yeah, like you know, on an Instagram story for those
I wish I would like audience like you. Can you imagine?
I'll tell you about it after.
There's like 1,000 views in the wild that I could just like create.
But that's what mad is. What's mad is I'm not rare. So the way that think about how people engage on Instagram, right? Let's talk about how we engage on Instagram.
Okay.
I post a meme or a video or something, and you're likely to react or comment back or make a comment, make a joke about it. And you also might do that for like not necessarily your closest friends, but like influencers, that like micro influencers that you engage with, that kind of thing. You might, reply or react to Instagram stories or comment on the post or like their post, right? And it's because but you're more likely to comment or message because you're expecting some kind of response because they're not a faceless brand. So what you need to think is like, how do we get our audience when we are a technically faceless brand? How do we give ourselves a face, a personality enough for audiences to want to comment and message us?
That's really cool.
That's literally the only way to do it.
To bring that brand though, I think a podcast is a great way to do that. Because, so taking over DA's Twitter, for example, it's a little bit more personable now in comparison to like a couple of months ago. And I tried to make it sound like there is a voice behind it. It's not some fake personalisation, it's legitimate personalisation. Where there is a person that if you tweet me or tweet DA Creative Studio, I'm a guy and I'll respond to you and we'll have a one-on-one conversation, essentially. And podcast is a really good way of businesses putting their client's face on camera and talk to them like humans, rather than just saying, my name is X CEO and this is the business, please buy our products.
Exactly.
But having a conversation with them makes them seem like people. We can then post that across socials and then people will reply to those things. because they feel like they just witness a human being have a conversation and they can converse with that human.
Yeah, I think a really good example of a business who, a marketing agency, it pains me to say it, Stephen Bartlett and his bloody social chain business. I don't know why I'm talking so quietly.
Yeah, you're whispering. I
really think Stephen is brilliant in it because he literally paved the way. Problem is that he's created a culture of absolute vapid thought leaders on LinkedIn, and it makes it really, really difficult for people to have genuine connections on some platforms. And it's not his fault necessarily, it's just he is the leader within that. And this guy is now on Dragon's Den. Like, this guy has absolutely paved the way for what we should expect from a millennial CEO. In fact, he might be Gen Z. I don't know. I can't remember how old he was. 21 when he set up a social chain.
Wow.
And he might be like 28 now. It wasn't too long ago.
That's mad.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And this guy's really, really clever. But do you know what? He's really clever, but he's also really creative. And he also doesn't give a shit. He just does stuff. And I can see why that's really attractive to other male CEOs and stuff, and looking at what he's done and trying to recreate it. But if we look at how Stephen, I don't know why I'm talking about him like I know it.
Yeah, ask Steve.
Ask Steve. Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett. I'll go Mr. Bartlett. No, it.
Don't give him respect.
Stephen.
CEO Bartlett.
The guy. Stephen Bartlett started off as a LinkedIn thought leader. He basically was one of the first proper influencers truly on LinkedIn. And what he did was, he talked about how he was 21 and he set up a business. And there were so many people following him who I don't think knew what really his business was. The social chain is a marketing company who really focused on social media. And this is where you can see Stephen's innovativeness, yes.
Innovation.
Innovation. Because he set up an entire company based on social media marketing at a time where social media was seen as supplementary to marketing rather than key. Fast forward, 6 years later, I'm working with a festival who has told me that their key marketing strategy is through social media with supplementary X, Y, and Z, which would have been the key focus.
Oh yeah, so basically all of my clients' marketing is just social media.
Exactly. So Stephen started at a time where that wasn't the case. So his social chain company quickly grew once people saw how exciting and the results that we all know coming from social media, if you do it right, people were getting so much more bang for the buck through that company.
Yeah.
But what he did while he was doing that was he would be completely honest and transparent and human on LinkedIn, telling people, how they've done things, why they were doing it, all this kind of stuff. And what he did was, instead of posting through the social chain, although they did do content through the social chain, he was himself talking about the innovations and things that they were doing, celebrating his employees. And I'm pretty sure on the back of that, he probably created a culture that his employees were doing the same. So the natural transition, he moved to Twitter, he moved to Instagram, and he did that. Then when video was becoming more important, he started recording that. So he started recording himself talking. And then now he owns one of the most popular business podcasts, which is called Diary of a CEO, I think, which was recently controversial. But that's where he sits down and talks to people who are, I think, CEOs or very successful people, which is totally fine and is a little bit kind of it's very good for people who have the aspiration to be where CEOs.
Yeah, it seems like it's an aspirational podcast. I listen to that because I want to listen to successful men and be like, how can I be successful man?
And you know what's really funny is that when he was a thought leader on LinkedIn writing his purpose, that wasn't necessarily aimed at people who want to be CEOs. I felt that was aimed at people who were interested in marketing, innovation, just generally people interested in him. But as his audience grew, people saw a 21-year-old be one of the most successful people in marketing, and they were like, how do I get a bit of that? And basically, this is why he's clever, because he has an entire group of people following him, not because of his necessarily the talent around social media or marketing, but because they want to be like him. So now he has a podcast where people get to listen to people that they want to be like. And it's generally dudes, let's face it. And it's now this whole culture of starting people to be thought leaders, to talk to their audience about this lesson they learn or this innovation that they did or why they don't give a shit about convention, I don't know, whatever. That's happened now.
I think this podcast
is where it is.
And I think the big problem with that essentially is people might be scared that it saturates the platform a bit. If everyone decides to become thought leader, then obviously it saturates the market.
It is LinkedIn, that's what it is now.
Yeah, exactly. However, I think there's still scope for people, obviously, to do it well, to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, like, again, I think synthetic personalization is it's how you get caught out. If you're only posting stuff because you want to be the next Steve Bartlett, then I think it's going to come across very simply as, okay, it's just doing what everyone else is doing right now.
Yeah, very transparent.
It's very transparent. Yeah. Whereas if we try to actually cultivate an environment of being actually transparent, of saying like, okay, so I work at this marketing agency, this is what we're struggling with at the minute, or this is the kind of idea where we want to go, so we're going to do this and that and the other to get to this point.
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, if I was to use LinkedIn, I would probably follow someone like a thought leader if I genuinely thought I was watching a journey of someone trying stuff, and just being honest and saying, okay, so I'm going to try and get someone, a community engaged, or also get this kind of audience fan base, or target this demographic. This is my idea of how I'm going to target that demographic, and this is what I'm going to do. And then week by week or step by step to be able to see that process being put into place, I think that would be quite interesting.
It's literally perfect. At the moment, if someone said to me, how do I attract more of my audience on Twitter? I would say, be yourself, have your face, like as in use your own personal profile or professional profile, and talk about things how you would in your voice. And there's no strategy involved there. Just don't be posting like personal stuff, but think like what information and knowledge or like questions can you put out there to the ether that people might connect with and care about. And that's kind of what that's basically it. And I personally aren't doing it on purpose, but I'm finding people are celebrating me as a brand myself more on LinkedIn and Twitter when I'm like basically just really, really honest. And I've actually recently completely changed my entire LinkedIn to, instead of being like, hi, my name's Jenny and I'm a blah, 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 like, you know, like trying to like do the whole CV thing. I basically just wrote like a small essay about like how, you know, like what I want to see from the industry and what my goals are.
I think that's the growth of people using LinkedIn properly. Because for years I was using LinkedIn as just an online CV. So that once I leave my current job, I then can say ended at, and then, you know, my current new employees can look at what I've been up to and see my kind of professional growth. Whereas really it's a social media network. It's a platform for us to basically say like, what are we up to? And whereas Facebook 10 years ago was like, I've just had beans on toast, like LinkedIn now is, I'm trying to engage with this demographic a lot.
Interestingly, there is a podcast actually that has, it kind of just remembered, it's rang a bell, and I'm pretty sure it was like one of the first podcasts I listened to after, because I think Stereo was my first podcast, and then second one was I was just looking up like good podcasts from marketers or business people to listen to, and a lot of them were just these like boss shit, like it was just really boring stuff.
Just inspiring messages, like
or like 5-minute clips you wake up to in the morning, it would just be some dude being like, make sure to do some push-ups, and I was like, what's that to do with like, anyway, really annoying. And then I found one, and it was, I'm pretty sure it was a woman who had been put in, it was in New York or in San Francisco, and she had been hired as an intern or like as like a temporary role, and it was in a big company, and she basically needed to make a podcast about the company, and basically she like walks around with a microphone, kind of like Serial, and kind of you go through like the everyday of what's happening. But do you know what? I think it's like her trying to get a raise. There's one point where I'm sure she's like wants to go through the process of getting a raise. I'm going to have to find it. I've literally
I'll link it in the description below.
Because it's really interesting, and I can't remember the aim of it specifically. I just know that she like will grab an employee of the company that she works for into a room, and she's trying to find out what's happening in some like at some point, and she just stands there with the microphone and they talk, and then when she goes home she actually talks to like her husband about it. Like, there's different things, but it is just her basically carrying around the podcast.
I love that. I love so much.
But she's learning about something, and I don't know whether or not it's about the company or how to make a podcast for the company or something, but it's very good.
Okay, so
but that's very honest. Sorry, I was going to say within that she has these mistakes that she makes, She like has a lot of learning. By the end of the podcast, her conclusion is kind of like, well, fuck me, wasn't I naive at the beginning of this?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. So, the reason why that podcast was so relatable wasn't someone, grabbing someone from the office and then getting them to sit down and then asking them some interview questions, and then it's like a 20-minute awkward interview, and then that's it. Because that's what a lot of people do with their podcast.
Yeah. So, alright, so again, full transparency. I want to use this podcast to actually be something that people want to listen to, especially if they're interested in marketing or social media development or anything along those lines. So right now, I'd imagine that there's a business out there who really wants to utilize podcasts, and then they find this on YouTube somewhere, and they watch it and listen to it, hopefully in order to gain some form of information about how to properly use podcasts. Right? And that's exactly where I am right now.
Yeah.
So the next episode of this podcast, what I would really like is to grab someone from the office, to sit them down in here and have a full transparent conversation with them. Not like, who are you, what is your job, but just in general terms of just like, what do you do? And like, what do you struggle with? Like, honestly, like, what is your day-to-day grind? Like, is there a way to make that interesting, or?
How do you put the grind on a podcast? Yeah.
I don't know. I just mean like in terms of like, this could be informative for someone. Like this episode is informative for someone who wants to make podcasting for marketing or what for business. And we've got social media managers in there. We've got designers, apprentices. We've got CEO. There is a way of people online trying to find information. I want to give it to them in an informative, semi-entertaining way.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I think anyone making any content for their company, especially things like podcasts or video series, is that the people on there there should be something about it that makes you want to follow the people on the episode that they're watching.
Yeah.
With an interesting enough perspective or anything like that. And that doesn't mean that you can't bring people on who may not necessarily have everyone will have something interesting to say, but quite often that's really scary format of just sitting and recording something and being filmed is intimidating and it doesn't show the personality. And I think like you could potentially really open up a format for people to sit and kind of like, do a really grinds my gears kind of like episode, but also trying to relay that back to like, what does good marketing with the people actually mean, rather than just like, Googling like, how do you market a business? Coming up with a generic article. So anyone can tell you how to market a business, but how do you like make it successful?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I really struggle, honestly, still. I struggle coming into work in the morning and not like Googling like trending topics or something like that. I want to be able to be a leader or innovative enough where I can come to work and be, you know what, this actually could be really good for my client. This campaign could be really, really interesting. It's worth doing. Rather than just like Googling trending topics and just seeing how my client could be wedged into whatever's being spoken about that day.
Exactly. I think, one of my gripes about social media.
What grinds your gears, Jen?
What grinds my gears is a lot of things, but just in this specific conversation is fucking hashtag calendars where it's like sandwich day, it's like every Thursday the 27th of March, I don't know why it's a Thursday, every 27th of March is sandwich day, and you have to like, everyone in the office has to get sandwiches. And it's like, what has this got to do with the morgue that's down the street? And you're not going to talk about that. But then you'll find the most ridiculous businesses trying to fit themselves into these hashtags, because some blog somewhere has told them a really good way to strategize your marketing is to look at what hashtags are important in the year and that you should talk about. And there's only probably about 2 in the year that there are some really important things to talk about.
Yeah, like LGBT, like month, Pride month, like these things. I think they're really these. Like, so I think Black History Month and like LGBT Pride. That's probably the only 2 hashtags that I would pay attention to.
Yeah, I would like International Women's Day. Like anything that means that as a company you can set your statement and support groups that need it.
Because you're actually doing something.
Yeah.
Right. So so for Pride Month this year, right? So I'm going to be in charge of the Twitter and the hashtags and all that kind of stuff. And I've already said to everyone in the office and sent emails to the CEO saying like, I want to do something for Pride Month, and I don't just want to change the icon like to a banner like a pride flag. I don't just want to say. I want us to actually be able to prove that we are somewhat helping the LGBT community. Yeah. Right. Not just tweet about it.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I see a company or a brand tweeting about LGBT and Pride Month, I'm looking at that post because I'm just like, okay, so how are you helping? Like, what are you doing?
Where's the action?
Where's the action you're talking about? So how are you helping?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas when it's like, time for a brew Monday, and it's just like, well, why am I reading
That's the same thing. Like literally, time for a brew Monday, hashtag time for a brew Monday, and then just using hashtag baba. What? Hashtag like a cause that matters.
Yeah.
But then just doing generic bursts. That's the same action, really. And what people should be doing is thinking, what, not just trying to fit yourself into whatever's trending or whatever the popular hashtag is, and thinking about what actions you can take, whether or not it's an actual action based on the hashtag, or does the hashtag fit into what we are doing right now, or something. There might be hashtag International Social Media Marketing Day, so that would be relevant for Drunk Animal to talk about in theory. I think realistically, people, instead of looking at what's trending and trying to work out what specifically might be relevant that you could talk about, why aren't you trying to make something trend? Why aren't you trying to start a conversation that might snowball over a few weeks into something that will be more interesting for people or more, and I think it's ridiculous that people need to follow these trends constantly. They should be looking for ways to, start their own conversations. And also, you don't have to be fucking viral to be successful. You could literally just be really, you could have like 100% engagement rate. I don't know if that's possible, but you could have like an 80% engagement rate on a post because you specifically started talking about something that your very niche audience cares about. But an 80% engagement rate with people that care is so much more important than like even just going viral.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so fleeting and like pointless.
It is. I think there is this desire for marketing agencies to go viral, right? Because with marketing agency, it can produce like a TikTok that's, how long is TikTok? 15 seconds?
Up to 60 seconds.
Alright, so so let's say I created this really funny and interesting TikTok video, which is not really anything to do with anything, but enough people like it enough to like it. That's great for this month. That means that this month I might get 1 million people looking at my business's TikTok channel. But next month I don't really see how it would help us.
No, exactly. You're right. Not the video view, like literally reach is such a vanity stat. Oh, we reached 1 million people. Who gives a shit? Like 11 million people could still have acknowledged your post. It's about who cared enough to follow, who did a valuable engagement. Because even likes is kind of redundant because liking something is just meh. And then you're done. You might not even read it. It might just be liked it because you know the company.
Even with our friends on Instagram, like I'll like a photo on Instagram that our friends have posted. One, just because they're a friend. And I don't think I read the caption. I don't know if you ever put a caption on your Instagram.
Oh my god, I literally put like lol teeth. Like, then my captions are so ridiculous and stupid. Like, they don't make any sense. But it's because I find selfies a bit of a meme and I find it funny. Like, I'm hot, but I'm going to laugh about it. But I think that, for example, we're going viral on TikTok. I went viral on TikTok.
You did?
I think I've got 200 or something followers on TikTok now, which is pointless because I have about 10 of those know me, and I get about 1 like or 2 likes from like you, and like 1 of us. I get like 10 likes per video if I post something normally, and I don't get any comments. And I don't really try to go viral, don't get me wrong, but I do like put things on that occasionally that I find interesting enough and I think, oh, that's fun. Or I have fun, TikTok's fun to make content on. I went to a party and did the whole trend, which is, I think Matt's going to get the most drunk tonight. But for those who haven't seen that, what you do is you set your phone up in a bathroom and you take a clip of each person guessing who might be the most drunk.
And we'll let you find on the story. But like that format would be great for DA. I mean, DA stands for Drunk Animal. We could easily do like a staff night out and be like, I think the CEO is going to get the most piss tonight, and then the CEO is I think Matt's going to get the most piss tonight. Yeah,
you could do it per job title. You could literally be like the CEO, and you leave Calvin until the end and have him really pissed. But you don't even have to make that actually that he's pissed. You can just have that joke. There's also a trend that was at the same time as this, which a lot of people did both the videos on the same night out when they're drunk, which is, this is me before my first shot and this is me before my last shot, and you get everyone to film and go like say if you're filming me, hi, like this is me before my first shot, take a shot, and then it's a quick cut to me going, this is me before my last shot, and like you do that, and it's the flip. And people like were posting content that was like all around one night out. So this trend, who's the most drunk tonight? Who's going to get the most drunk tonight? I did at a costume party where everybody, it was for a music video, and we were having a party afterwards in costume, and everyone was like peak dressed up to like the nines in costume. Oh my god, we had like Snow Queen, Ursula, Megara from Hercules, I was Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove, and everybody literally put in, like, the costumes are impeccable.
Yeah.
But it's like going to Comic-Con, kind of like...
What's your TikTok handle? Do you know it? Jenni.E or something like that.
I don't know. Do I know my TikTok handle?
I'll link it in the description below. So
I don't really want to go on.
No, I want to see a surge of spiking viewers of your TikTok after this podcast.
Well, I'm going to see it, I guess.
Yeah, so it's just a visual reference for what you're talking about.
Yeah. This went because of the costuming and because everyone was doing this trend with just normal outfits with their mates saying, I think Matt's going to get the most show tonight. What we did is in character, people were like, I think Ethan's going to get the most drunk tonight.
Yeah.
I think Cruella de Vil's going to get the most drunk tonight. And then, so it was really fun. It went viral. Like, it had, like, I think it was like 80,000 views within a couple of days, kind of thing. Oh, no, it was like over that. I can't remember, but there was a lot. And considering normally I get like 2 views on a video.
And it was like over 200 comments as well.
Yeah, massive amount of people were like, and it's still, I still get comments on it since there.
Yeah. I was going to comment today from Beers.
But what's hilarious is that I continue to get 2 likes and no views on any of my other videos. It literally was a fleeting moment of virality. People followed me, but I haven't seen any of that amount. The people that follow me, I think I have like 200 people following me. I literally get the same amount as I did when I had 10 people following me. And like that really long roundabout story shows that, especially on platforms like TikTok where it is very fleeting, you can be incredibly successful. But even the most successful influencers probably have to post about 4 or 5 videos in order to go viral. And they have to really research like the sounds, the hashtags, and get the right meme format in order to, get the right format of whatever people want to see. Right? And it's not just dances, it's like such an, the LGBT sort of like part of, LGBTQ plus part of TikTok is like its own niche world that the algorithm puts people in. But I see things that trend, like the sort of sounds that trend that I'm singing, and then my partner, he's like, what are you singing? And I'm like, have you not heard it yet? It's like literally viral on TikTok. And it's because he's not on LGBTQ plus TikTok.
No, it's not part of that algorithm. Like, it's the same with Twitter as well. The people that I follow on my personal Twitter are kind of typically, it's kind of like black Twitter. So there's a lot of African American profiles. But because I follow enough of them, I have very specific humour targeted towards me, which maybe you wouldn't find on the opposite Twitter. But yeah, I guess a little bit off topic there. But yeah, you're right. I think there's a massive push for us to go viral. When that doesn't help brand, it doesn't help us as a marketing agency, and it wouldn't help any of our clients either. Because unless every post we did went viral and people like knew to check in on us for funny content, we're going to post 10 videos a week, and one of them might get 80,000 views and a bunch of people commenting, but that won't translate into active followers, it won't translate to engagement or lead generation.
Exactly. It's the same as, I've got 2 points. There's the same, first of all, as promoting a post, having, putting on 10 grand on an advert, which is quite a lot of money for a Facebook ad. We're putting 10 grand on one advert, and then getting like a lot of comments and likes. All people are doing is engaging. You're just paying for people to engage with that post. What would be more useful is finding out what people want to watch and listen to or talk about or something, and posting it organically and then giving it like little toot boosts of like a couple of quid every couple of days. That you can do things in a way to create organic engagement with a little boost. And I think that's the reason why Facebook called adverts boosts. Instead of just seeing like just paying for your likes, paying for your followers essentially is kind of it's just so expensive considering you could do it all for free. In terms of time expenditure, not, but in terms of monetary expenditure,
I think that essentially what we've learned from this podcast is that if we're going to be using podcasts in order to promote business, which this is technically, this podcast will be used so that I can post it across years, like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I want to use this so people are interested in it. And already, I don't know how long this video is, it's fucking long. It's not 15 minutes.
It's only 50 minutes.
50?
Yeah.
50?
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be 20.
Sorry. Yeah, but it might be that engaging that this length of this podcast might be great because people want to hear us talk for 50 fucking minutes.
Yeah. I don't think we've got friends on here.
To be fair, but to be fair, is it to make the point? If you are putting content out that is interesting and engaging and your audience will sit and listen to this kind of shit for 50 minutes, why wouldn't you post that? It's that whole thing of trying to fit into whatever's trending or whatever hashtag it is. If your audience cares about you, in theory, and you've got the right audience, and you basically create content that fits into their mold.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. With the podcast, what I was trying to say about virality, really quickly, and this kind of all fits together, is the fact that you might as well aim to please 10 people forever.
Yeah.
And then if more people come along, great. But if you can make 10 people absolutely adore you and they will invest and shout about your business forever, that is so much more valuable than having, 100,000 people have seen that one post that you promoted, or 80,000 people view that one TikTok that you did when you were all pissed dressed as Disney characters.
Yeah.
There's no point. And I think that's, with a podcast, there's such more of an opportunity to not do something generic and to actually think of how podcasts are loved, and it's people sat thinking that they're listening to two friends or whatever talk, and that's generally where podcast is most effective. Or even if it's a fucking entire journalist series like Serial, when I listen to that, I feel like I'm in the car with the journalist finding out about what they are.
Yeah.
It's very much that. It's very casual, it's very you're along for the journey.
Alright, so finish your point, Mrs. Wild-Arms.
Sorry, that was the point.
That was the point. I do agree. I think that's the best part.
Genuine and valuable engagement is possible.
Yeah. That's going to be my project. I'm going to now treat this podcast, full transparency, this is a podcast, project. Right.
This is a podcast.
This is a podcast. This is a project as well. Now, my project is I'm going to do exactly that. Mm-hmm. And once this podcast is edited, I'm going to put it on the YouTubes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that the CEO will like it because it's on his account, it's his business.
I thought you meant just imagine that he'll enjoy watching it.
Oh, maybe not. He might not see it. He won't get this far. And there will be the people in the office who will like it, like the YouTube video. I'm thinking physically like it.
I'll watch it.
So maybe watch it. Maybe they'll just like it. Okay. So as in terms of the podcast projects, so again, we want this to go out to people who want to watch this podcast and think, how do I effectively use podcasting for my business? So that is the goal.
And hopefully they'll thought of many ideas while we spoke.
Hopefully, yeah, 100%. So I want to engage 10 people.
Yes.
That's the project. 10 people who do not like the idea, who not our friends, who are just going to like it because they love seeing our faces and hearing our voices. I want 10 people from across the world in the next year to stumble across this podcast, watch it, learn from it, and physically click that like button.
Or comment on it. Yeah.
So by this time next year, so it's February 3rd, by this time next year, I want to be able to look back on this video and it have, let's say, around 20 likes or some form of comments or engagement. Because where this podcast I want to take is a project of how we can just be very transparent about marketing. I want to try and use this format, so do another few videos this month to get people about literally transparency and what the hell are we doing, what are we struggling with, and what are our plans going forward.
I love it. And I would love to see you on your main full-length podcast getting 10 people who care. And I would like to see the report on that. I would like to see if that happens. I would also like to challenge you to, and also tip of the day from Jenni is, and this is what your intentions were anyway, you film your podcast and you cut it up into key points and sound bites that make great sort of 15 to 60-second videos, and you can edit them for long-form video and put them on TikTok or Instagram Reels, and they generally need to be funny, engaging, interesting, or witty, stupid, meme, Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those two doing silly faces and high-fiving. The interesting, good job, full circle is the young person's podcast that I did we used to advertise that podcast not by, so this is like literally a tip, we didn't just like a podcast episode up now, enjoy. I used to animate the voice clips of the young people talking. Mm-hmm. So I used to make these little characters and actually animate them birth. Kind of like Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
Like that kind of style thing. We did like 10 or 15 seconds of that. And I used to sit, and I am not an animator, and spend like 3 hours animating this 15-second clip. And then we realised it was easier if we just recorded the fucking podcast and just cut between them. But instead of doing like one conversation, I would choose the most stupid faces or ridiculous shit that they looked like or said, just like a soundbite, and basically make a montage to make it just seem like absolute chaos on the podcast. And we got way more views and engagements because of that.
So the way that I could market this podcast, in terms of me I'm going to post on socials maybe next week, the way I could market is by including some form of short clip of us, laughing or saying something daft, or just a montage of daft shit. And you think that would get more engagement than if I just say podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, I just had a flashing from somewhere. I think that camera is dead now. So I think it's a good time for us to end the podcast. If the camera's going to physically die on us, I think it's time for us to physically die.
Maybe it wasn't that good of a podcast.
Yeah.
Here's us thinking we're fucking going to go viral after this.
Yeah, no, we don't want to go viral. That's the point. I just want 10 people to like it.
Bye, we'll see you.
Alright, Jenny, thank you so much for coming in. And do you want to say your name, promote a book, anything like that?
I wish I fucking could promote a book.
Right.
My name's Jenny, hello. Jenni Harrison. And I'm fully booked till June, so don't fucking email me, thank you very much.
And Matt. And I don't know why we didn't do introductions at the beginning, but introductions at the end is just quirky.
It's cool,
just,
it's like, I always have of it.
Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you got some then.
Bye.